Powerful earthquake kills hundreds in Turkey and Syria. More than 1,900 dead as buildings collapse in pre-dawn quake, with multiple aftershocks. A powerful 7.8 magnitude earthquake rocked southeastern Turkey and northern Syria early Monday, toppling hundreds of buildings and killing more than 1,900 people. Hundreds were still believed to be trapped under rubble, and the toll was expected to rise as rescue workers searched mounds of wreckage in cities and towns across the area.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.
Workers searched mounds of wreckage in cities and towns across the area. On both sides of the border, residents jolted out of sleep by the pre-dawn quake rushed outside on a cold, rainy, and snowy winter night, as buildings were flattened and strong aftershocks continued. Rescue workers and residents in multiple cities searched for survivors, working through tangles of metal and giant piles of concrete. A hospital in Turkey collapsed and patients, including newborns, were evacuated from a handful of facilities in Syria. Because the debris removal efforts are continuing in many buildings in the earthquake zone, we do not know how high the number of dead and injured will rise, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said in a televised address. Our hope is that we recover from this disaster with the least loss of life possible. In the Turkish city of Adana, one resident said 3 buildings near his home collapsed. "I don't have the strength anymore," one survivor could be heard calling out from beneath the rubble as rescue workers tried to reach him, said the resident, journalism student Mohammed Fadiyevas. Farther east in Diyarbakir, cranes and rescue teams rushed people on stretchers out of a mountain of pancaked concrete floors that was once an apartment building. The U.S. Geological Survey measured Monday's quake at 7.8. At least 20 aftershocks followed. Quake adds to misery in war-torn region. The USGS said the quake was centered about 33 kilometers from Gaziantep, a Turkish provincial capital. It was 18 kilometers deep. Hours later, a 7.5 magnitude quake struck more than 100 kilometers away. An official from Turkey's disaster management agency, Orhan Tatar, said it was a new earthquake, not an aftershock, though its effects were not immediately clear. Hundreds of aftershocks were expected after the 2 temblors, Tatar said. More than 1,100 people were killed in 10 Turkish provinces, with some 7,600 injured, according to the country's disaster management agency. The death toll in government-held areas of Syria climbed to over 430 people, with some 1,280 injured. In rebel-held northwest areas of Syria, more than 380 people were killed, with hundreds more injured, according to the opposition White Helmets volunteer emergency organization. The quake struck a region that has been shaped on both sides of the border by more than a decade of civil war in Syria. On the Syrian side, the swath affected is divided between government-held territory and the country's last opposition-held enclave, which is surrounded by Russian-backed government forces. Turkey, meanwhile, is home to millions of refugees from that conflict. The opposition-held regions in Syria are packed with some 4 million people displaced from other parts of the country by the fighting. Many of them live in buildings that are already wrecked from past bombardments. Hundreds of families remain trapped in rubble, the White Helmets said in a statement. Buildings were reported collapsed in a wide area extending from Syria's cities of Aleppo and Hama to Turkey's Diyarbakir, more than 330 kilometers to the northeast. Nearly 900 buildings were destroyed in Turkey's Gaziantep and Kahramanmaraş provinces, said Vice President Fuat Oktay. A hospital collapsed in the Mediterranean coastal city of Iskenderun, but casualties were not immediately known, he said. Unfortunately, at the same time, we are also struggling with extremely severe weather conditions, Oktay told reporters. Nearly 2,800 search and rescue teams have been deployed in the disaster-stricken areas, he said. International offers of aid. Countries including Russia, Germany, and Israel offered to send help, whether medical supplies, search teams, or money. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said members of the alliance were mobilizing support to help Turkey deal with the aftermath, with the European Union also saying it planned to mobilize aid. In Turkey, people trying to leave the quake-stricken regions caused traffic jams, hampering efforts of emergency teams trying to reach the affected areas. Authorities urged residents not to take to the roads. Mosques around the region were being opened up as a shelter for people unable to return to damaged homes amid temperatures that hovered around freezing. The quake heavily damaged Gaziantep's most famed landmark, its historic castle perched atop a hill in the center of the city. Parts of the fortress's walls and watchtowers were leveled and other parts heavily damaged, images from the city showed. In Diyarbakir, hundreds of rescue workers and civilians formed lines across a mountain of wreckage, passing down broken concrete pieces, household belongings, and other debris as they searched for trapped survivors while excavators dug through the rubble below. In northwest Syria, the quake added new woes to the opposition-held enclave centered on the province of Idlib, which has been under siege for years, with frequent Russian and government airstrikes. The territory depends on a flow of aid from nearby Turkey for everything from food to medical supplies. The quake also jolted residents in Lebanon from beds, shaking buildings for about 40 seconds. Many residents of Beirut left their homes and took to the streets or drove in their cars away from buildings, terrorized by memories of the 2020 port explosion that wrecked a large portion of the city. Turkey sits on top of major fault lines and is frequently shaken by earthquakes. Some 18,000 were killed in powerful earthquakes that hit northwest Turkey in 1999. The opposition-held enclave centered on the province of Idlib, which has been under siege for years, with frequent Russian and government airstrikes. The territory depends on a flow of aid from nearby Turkey for everything from food to medical supplies. The quake also jolted residents in Lebanon from beds, shaking buildings for about 40 seconds. Many residents of Beirut left their homes and took to the streets or drove in their cars away from buildings, terrorized by memories of the 2020 port explosion that wrecked a large portion of the city. Turkey sits on top of major fault lines and is frequently shaken by earthquakes. Some 18,000 were killed in powerful earthquakes that hit northwest Turkey in 1999. Thousands were killed in powerful earthquakes that hit northwest Turkey in 1999.
Subscribe our YouTube channel and click our bell icon for new videos.